Today on Spotlight Now, we spotlight the city and county of Honolulu and speak to two leaders who are tackling the island's biggest problems.
Honolulu Police Chief Joe Logan is here in the studio with us, and he'll be followed by Honolulu City Council Chair Tommy Waters. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on this Tuesday. We have a lot to get through. And of course, one of the things that we like to do here on Spotlight Now is engage you, the viewing audience. Please feel free to head over to the Facebook page of our Hawaii News Now page and enter your question and comments for our guests in the comment sections. Or you can scan this QR code, which we will be monitoring throughout the show, and your questions and comments for our guests.
And we start off with our first guest this afternoon, and that is Honolulu Police Chief Joe Logan. Thank you so much for being here, Chief.
Thank you, Yunji. Thank you, Kalei. Looking forward to the opportunity.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you, and I want to start with public safety, of course, and violent crime. I think that a lot of us, it seems like more and more there are so many gun violence issues, so many shootings that we're seeing lately. Tell us about the numbers that you're seeing and how you sort of process that in terms of public safety.
So crime overall is still down in Honolulu. However, we have crime, so we're not completely exonerated from all crime. Unfortunately, we have individuals out there that, for whatever reason, want what other people have and take things either by violence or by just general theft. And so with this crime that's ongoing, how do we as a Honolulu Police Department play into that? We have the men and women, both in uniform and civilian workforce, that's doing tremendous jobs and tremendous strides in helping law enforcement do all the requirements that it needs to do to get out there in front of crime. There's a lot of proactive policing that's ongoing, and that's kind of the numbers, as I think we'll get into as we continue this discussion, into the violent crime and why we see a rise in, say, weapons offenses. That doesn't mean crimes with weapons. That means offenses that involve you having a weapon of some kind that's illegal to possess. And our officers are finding those on the streets. And so that's why I believe it's one of the factors why that increase in crime is. We're not like mainland cities where people in the hundreds of homicides that they deal with. But one is too many in our state and city and county. So how do we as the Honolulu Police Department deal with all those? There has been an increase in homicides. We can attribute that to, unfortunately, the incident that happened in Manoa where one family of four was murdered in a suicide. And so that unfortunately raises the number. But again, 6, 7, 8, that's still too many. We've also had 8 people die on our highways. Only one by vehicle and the other one's by pedestrian, bicycle, or moped. And so what are we, how are we involved in helping enforcement on our highways to keep that safe and secure for all of our people too?
We want to talk about some of those specific cases that you mentioned, sure. But taking a broader perspective, you spoke to the commission just last week and gave some numbers about how Honolulu stacks up against some of the major cities. What can you share us about some of those numbers and what we're seeing overall with trends and any specific types of crime when it's comparable to other cities?
So we're seeing, I think what I alluded to, the weapons offenses, about a 43% increase. So many factors probably attributed to that increase, but one of which I believe is our Honolulu police officers proactively out on the streets, patrolling, investigating either covertly or overtly on patrol duties as our crime reduction units are out there, our narcotics vice and other entities are out there doing their job, trying to curb other crimes, are running across individuals that possess something that they shouldn't, such as a firearm. We also see an increase in firearms numbers that are firearms involved in cases, and so we're dealing with those. Last year we didn't keep statistics on ghost guns. This year we have. So if you looked at, say, a statistic, it would show, say, a 2,300% increase, only because we weren't tracking it last year. This year we are. And so we're involved in those. The numbers aren't high, but there are significant search warrants that we go on, whether it's an illegal game room or other operations, or at a shooting event, incident where somebody took it upon themselves to harm another person by gun violence, we're finding ghost guns in theirs or unregistered firearms. So what does that mean? Where are they coming from? How are they getting here? Working with our federal partners on trying to answer those questions. But those are all the things that we're dealing with.
And what are you finding in pursuing that? Where are these guns coming from?
That's just it. We don't have a good answer to that. We know they're coming from the mainland. They're coming in parts through the mail, or they're coming in people's baggage or home, whether they're shipping, home products here. And so they're coming either probably by mail or in person through the airports.
And that 43% uptick that you made reference to, are these registered guns? Are these all illegal weapons? Are these primarily those ghost guns that you're talking about? Is it a mix?
No, I think it's only a small percentage. There are other incidents such as switchblades, double-edged daggers, and things that are illegal to possess. Maybe another thing, you might carry a bat for a reason at your house because you're a baseball player, but if you have it in your car at 2 a.m, ready to use it in a manner or carrying it in a manner that is a little more aggressive and you're not playing baseball, leads one to believe that you're carrying that for another purpose. And so that would be a statistic for a weapons offense. And so it's not necessarily a gun per se, and that increase is not just attributed to guns. It's attributed to a plethora of different devices that are dangerous and or illegal to carry in certain circumstances.
In just talking and sticking on this topic of guns overall, with the change that's happened with the concealed carry laws, have we seen any direct result of some of these changes in the laws in which what our gun owners are allowed and where they're allowed to possess these firearms? What have you noticed since that transition has happened?
Nothing's come across my desk as of yet that attributed any crime to a license to carry individual. I believe there are a couple instances, 2 at the most. I think that we have to look at issued a license to carry, and then maybe they inadvertently carried the wrong weapon system. They probably have multiple guns. They had a license for a certain type, but they carried the other one. And so perhaps working through that, but those are things we're taking a look at. We're doing an investigation to make sure if you violated it clearly by the chief's rules and based on the law, then we have to revoke that permit. And so we're working through those issues. But very small, other than those 2, we don't have people that have a license to carry out committing crimes.
You know, when you kind of put this all together, the perception is, even though the numbers are down, the perception is that
Yes.
Public safety is really threatened. What do you say to those in our community who do feel that way when you counteract that feeling with the data that you're presenting?
I mean, it's we're, as a leader, my thoughts and prayers to anyone who is a victim of crime, because to them it's personal and it's very real, and it's something that no matter what we say statistically, they're now a victim within those statistics, and so they look at it or perceive it to be different. And so crime is out there, unfortunately, as I said earlier. So how do we as a law enforcement entity, a police department, try to help with our proactive policing reduce that? Some of that is media, right? The media whether social media or the television news or the printed news, all of that is regurgitating the same thing over and over again. And so people perceive that crime may be running rampant when in actuality it's not. If you look at statistics back to the 1980s and 90s, crime was relatively very high. As compared to that, we've come down a lot through the 2020 into a lower crime period by tens of thousands of crimes. And so based off of that, I think we in law enforcement, and as a police chief, I'm looking at statistics and I see crime as low. However, like you say, as a victim, your perception is completely different.
One of those cases that, of course, has made headlines and we briefly touched upon was the tragedy that happened in Manoa. I'm wondering if you can provide us any updates or share with us anything further on that case. We know that a lot of information was provided by the Homicide Department through a press conference, but can we expect any other additional information to come forward, and also to get an update on maybe how the officers who responded to that, how they're doing after that horrible incident?
So I've had a discussion with the lieutenant, the homicide lieutenant, and they are coming to the conclusion of the reports necessary to close the incident or the case. But going back to what the officers are talking about, I got to go during the incident itself and was there at the scene and talked to the officers that initially went in. But then what I didn't talk to is the detectives that went in afterwards that had to handle the cases, process the evidence with the civilian workforce that also did that. But I did get a chance to go talk to our communications department who handled all of that, who heard it all through the radio systems, watched what they could on television, but weren't there in real life to see what the officers were seeing, but they got to read about it and hear it over the communications channel. So they have a different perspective. So how do we deal with all those? We provided peer support to all those officers and our civilian workforce, as well as we have our own mental health people to help work through any of those challenges. But I've talked to the leadership of both of the patrol units that were there first on the scene and the homicide lieutenant and her team, and everybody is doing well. They are dealing with and processing what they saw, what they had to investigate, and it's trauma, as you mentioned earlier, that's going to be with them for the rest of their lives. How they process that trauma, how they deal with it, they're working through that, much like the community. The school that the kids went to, the community in Manoa that knew the families, all are dealing now with this trauma. And so how are they all dealing with it? And I hope all of them are reaching out to someone to talk to, either professionally or somebody that they know, that they can work through the issues and concerns of this trauma and what that means to them.
Yeah, I'm interested also, in your own life, being a leader in this department, how you're processing that, because it is difficult, I would think, to be a leader when something like that happens and everyone's looking to you for answers.
Yes, I'm gracious enough to have a wonderful spouse who I can talk to, and she can provide feedback to me and help me see the perspective and understand what I saw. But I also have the chaplains that work in the Honolulu Police Department, as well as our peer support, who've called me or come up to my office and said, "Chief, you got a minute, how are you doing?" And so I'm able to talk to them and work through any issues or concerns that I may have with how our officers are dealing, because very concerned with, our officers and our civilian workforce that saw what they saw and really haven't seen that kind of carnage and trauma before. How are they dealing with it?
Yeah, and I want to kind of follow up on that. I mean, when all of us are trying to make sense of this, and it is something that probably will never make sense, but how do you, talk to people? How do you hope the community understands what happened in Manoa?
I think we have to talk about it. That's one of the biggest things. One thing to work through trauma that I've seen and studied and looked at, even, I deployed to Afghanistan and what I saw there, what I went through there, coming back home and dealing with some of the things that I went through. It's you have to talk to somebody, but you've got to talk to them. You can't hide it. You can compartmentalize it while you're engaged in the actual activity of investigation, like we do in law enforcement. But you have to be able to, at the end of that, or a couple days, weeks, months later, is talk about it. And talk about it with a professional if you have to, or our peer support or chaplains, somebody that can give you another side to help you release that traumatic event from your psyche, and so that whatever you're compartmentalizing and keeping is much smaller than what you had maybe the first couple days as you thought through what you experienced.
And just to tie up this topic, and just want to confirm, with just any other additional information that maybe the public can expect, do you anticipate anything else coming to light, or do you think that things and the information that was already provided is pretty much all that we're going to get at this point?
I think the second press conference answered a lot of questions for the public and the media, and for myself too. But as I was speaking with the lieutenant, like I said, she is finishing up the reports. I'll ask her if there's anything else that we think we need to go back out to the public and give them one more look at what happened, and provide any maybe follow-up answers for closure for the community, really, and what they're dealing with.
Well, since you've taken the helm, we've been having these conversations, and we really do appreciate your time. And one topic that we touch on again and again is recruitment and retention. Yes. One of the things that you were really brought in to help with is beefing up that workforce. How is that going?
It's moving slowly. I can see we've lost a few people over the 2 years that I've been there. And so it's, I won't say it got worse. It's just, I hope we finally turn the page on recruiting and we're going to start back. I can tell you with the incentives we now have and the recruiting team and all that they're working through, whether in our HR department, our video section that's providing videos out to the public, reels on our social media, that people are biting into this and taking a look at it. I know the incentives that the mayor just announced, $25,000 over about a 4-year period with a tiered payment system. Whether it's 3 months into the system, you get $2,500. Graduate from the academy, you get $5,000. You finish your first year probation, you get $750. $7,500, and at the end of 3 years at that time, you get a $10,000. So $25,000 over a group. So it's not just an incentive to join us, but it's also retention to stay in the 4 years, and see what HPD is all about. Is this the career, the path that you want to do? I've been out in the communities. I was at the military commissary the other day. An individual who I didn't know at all saw me and said, "Are you the chief?" I said, "Yes." And so he started telling me that he has people in the military that are transitioning out and that this is an incentive for them. They were on the fence before, but now they see it as an opportunity. Not to mention we have a skill bridge program. Well, the military has a skill bridge program, and in that program we're now a part of that. So we're one of the few organizations that can be a part of skill bridge. And in the last 3 or 4 months of a military person's time in service on their transitioning to civilian life, that they can come work for us, and then the DoD will pay for them as they transition and become an officer or in another field within the Honolulu Police Department, and that's what we're offering. And so that's another incentive to get individuals who are leaving the military but perhaps want to stay in Hawaii. But really the reason for part of this 25,000 is for those local people that moved to the mainland for whatever reason, whether they went to college and stayed or they found better or other jobs on the mainland. But if you have a desire to come back to Hawaii, here's an incentive to help you fund that transition back to Hawaii, and then come work for the Honolulu Police Department. And as we'll work you back in, either if you're law enforcement there, we can ladder you here into our program in a much shorter span recruit academy and then onto the streets. But we're offering the same 25,000 for them also.
What would you say at this point is the biggest need and the area that is the biggest need? Because we often hear that, if there were more police officers on the force, there would be a larger presence in certain areas of our community. Where do you see the most significant need for individuals? Is it on the front lines? Is it in the civilian roles? Where is that connect where you're really trying to advocate for people?
Thank you for that question. I mean, if you look at it statistically, the largest shortage is in our patrol element or our officers, our sworn officers. But really, our communications division, our what we used to call dispatchers, now police communications officers 1, 2, 3, and 4. There we're short, and we're short in the PCOs or police communication officers 2 and 1s. And so how do we help them? How do we entice more people to come in? Was the test that we were offering to get them initial entry, was that more difficult than it should have been? And I think we've taken a look at that. We've seen that. And so we're reducing the requirements of the exam to make it at the entry level of PCO 1. So when they come in, and then it's our job in the communications department division to instruct them and teach them and work with them to get them to the levels 2, 3, and 4, so they go on to supervise and lead in the future years. And so that's what we're working right now. We have almost a 30% gap there. So how do we work through that and help our police communications officers and fill that void? And so we're working diligently on that part too.
When you look at how, all the steps that have been taken thus far, the 25,000 really does seem like the biggest sort of major step, at least financially. But it does feel like since you've taken the helm that you're kind of treading water. As much as you've tried to add new classes, people leave. So what do you attribute that to? Why do you think it has been so challenging? And I know it's not just HPD, it's police departments nationwide.
No, absolutely. We're not we're immune to anything what's going on the mainland. We are similar to our counterparts on the mainland, where we have roughly about 400 vacancies. They sometimes have a lot more than that. Louisiana just went and declared an emergency, their governor, because they're like 1,800 or 1,200 officers short. And so how are they dealing with it? What are they doing? And there are cities that offer bonuses or incentive pay for people to come in. We have lost, I think, 10 this year. Over 2023 and 24, we've lost about 10 officers. But really, when you look at retirements, we've only had 68 people retire last year and the year before. And so really that's lower than previous years. We've had as much as 100 or as little as 50 something retire, when at any given time we have a couple hundred that are eligible to retire. This is a very difficult job. To be a law enforcement police officer day in and day out. Now we have a 13-hour shift of 3 days a week with 4 days off, and hopefully that's working through and working with us. I've watched or looked at the surveys that have come in and see that a lot of officers that initially were afraid of 13 hours a day have now said, hey, wait a minute, I like this 3-day work week and I get 4 days off. And you can spend that 4 days however you want, hopefully, decompressing with your family. But I think all those are incentives too that are helping us as people come to say, hey, I can, it's not a fire department with 24 on, 24 off, but 13 hours a day, and not all of that's road time. It's 12 hours in patrol and then an hour to catch up on all your paperwork, do what you need to do, and then head home and go spend time with your family.
One of the things that was talked about when you were brought in for this role was really helping with just the overall perception and the public perception of HPD because of just the history and what has happened in incidents that revolve the department. I'm wondering if you can speak to some of the instances that maybe have had a negative impact on the department and maybe hindering the ability to recruit people. We know of the manslaughter investigation that was announced that is being looked into regarding the incident of the suspect who fled on a moped and was pursued by police. The pursuit that happened on the west side of the island as well as what's happened on New Year's Day with that pursuit as well. Some of these things have resulted in investigations by officers. How are you combating some of those incidences while trying to maintain the perception that the police department is under control and that while these incidents happen, there are still some question marks about how it's being handled?
Well, to me, it's about doing our due diligence as a law enforcement agency, as a leader of an organization, and how do you permeate that leadership by leading by example and saying, hey, we do not condone certain behaviors. We, just like any other organization, have sometimes people that overstep their bounds and that have gone outside what the policies and standards of conduct allow and take their own actions. And in those, it's sometimes not as swift as the public may like a disciplinary action to happen, and it takes time to do investigations. But if you're, talking about the police pursuit that happened in Makaha a couple of years ago, that one took quite a while. But it's a very technical, very long-term investigation that came to the results that it came with, and then the actions fell on my desk to pursue that and discharge individuals for behaviors. So that's one thing. So the officers, there's an old saying that nobody likes bad police officers than good police officers. They do not like their own overstepping their bounds and doing something that now tarnishes the uniform and badge that we wear. And that's something I cover when at recruit school at graduations. I talk about how we not tarnish that image, your name, the Honolulu Police Department, and the badge that you wear. This is one of the few professions that doesn't matter where you are in the United States. If one officer does one thing outside the parameters of what and illegal, immoral, improper, that reverberates across like a pebble in the pond. We all feel that, as we should, and we as a profession need to do our best all the time. We can do 99 things correct, but it's that one time that's going to get the attention. And so how do we avoid that one time? But we always got to be ready. We always got to be on our toes. And we got to have leaders that are leading their organizations within the department to ensure that we can reduce that to a zero, or at least very minimal.
One of the things that was supposed to help with that is body cameras. And I know that in one of the incidents that Ryan referenced regarding the moped pursuit, that the officers were not wearing cameras. They were not required to. Should more officers be required to wear body cameras so that there isn't, a he said, she said situation? Exactly.
And I was just doing an inspection with the District 2 the other night, talking about what body-worn cameras, and officers are worried. They're like, well, it's going to catch me doing something. Well, if it catches you doing something you shouldn't have done, then that's what it's there for. But it's really there to exonerate you. And I would say 75-80% of the time, it exonerates the officer from a complaint from the outside, from the public, saying this officer did this or this. And so that's the reason for the body-worn camera. Yes, you're correct. Our crime reduction units do not have. That's a conversation we're having with the leadership at HPD right now. Do we have the resources to purchase body-worn cameras and issue it to them? Now, they can't wear it all the time because there are certain portions of their operations that are covert and not for everyone to see, and how they operate and do their job. But once they come out of that environment of covert and say, I'm now going to play police officer by identifying myself through garments that I wear, then that's the time for the body-worn camera to be on and active. And so then we can see what's going on as you invoke an arrest or something, an engagement to the public. So there are times for them not to wear it, just like our narcotics vice units and our special weapons and tactics team. When is it right for them to do it? When is it not right for them to do it? And so that's something we got to work through policy-wise. I've asked our major city chiefs. We're one of 70 organizations across the U.S. that meet 3 times a year. And so I've asked them, so do you give it to your plainclothes officers, your body-worn camera? And it's a 50-50. Some do, some don't. And they all have good reasons for doing it or not doing it.
As we wrap up here in our conversation, I just wanted to get, just some final thoughts about what you would say to those in the community who feel like there are still a lot of violent crimes, whether there be an increase in burglaries and instances that are happening with stores and robberies. What is just your general message to the community? What concerns you, and what would you say to those who are worried about the direction that we're heading?
Yeah, like I said earlier, being a victim of any one of these crimes, your perception of crime overall is going to be exacerbated. Statistically, that's not true. Crime is very low throughout the city and county of Honolulu. And you have, there's still 1,700 officers, sworn officers, that are out there doing their due diligence every day, along with 400 civilians that are working very hard in the community to ensure that everyone is safe and secure, and to do the mission, which is to deter crime, apprehend criminals, maintain public order. And I add, dealing with homelessness and that kind of issues, the mentally challenged that our officers are now required to handle, which is really not a law enforcement issue, but takes up a lot of our officers' time. That's part of the mission that we do. And we really follow our vision, which is let us be revered in our mission to guard the people. So two key words there is revered and guard. Revered is something that's an emotional attachment. So I want every officer, every civilian to feel an emotional attachment to its mission, which is to guard the people of the city and county of Honolulu.
Yeah, and briefly before we let you go, we talked about recruitment and retention and all the challenges. Is this a good place to work? What's the pitch to people who are interested in becoming a police officer?
It's a noble profession. It's been around for 200 years, started in Britain with Sir Robert Peel, creating what is the modern day citywide municipal police departments. It's fantastic. We've had 92 years here in the city and county of Honolulu. It's a great place to be employed. It's, like I said, you serve for a purpose higher than yourselves. You're not necessarily serving for money, but money is there. Your salaries, you're going to get paid. You have your family to take care of. You have things that you need to take care of. And so you're going to get paid decent. But you're doing this to serve the public, not yourself. And that's really the bottom line. And it's a fantastic organization. There's great people doing great things every day. Unfortunately, we don't always get the media attention that we need on them, but we have to do a good job of telling our own story through social media and through our internal mechanisms within our department.
We appreciate you sharing some of that story today. Thank you so much. Honolulu Police Chief Joe Logan. Our guest now, Tommy Waters, is right here after the break. Stay with us.
Well, welcome back to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. Joining us now is County Council Chair Tommy Waters. Thank you so much, Chair, for joining us and being here live.
Aloha, happy to be here.
We want to start off just tagging off what we just had the conversation with Joe Logan about just the state of where we're at as a city and county of Honolulu, and maybe what you're hearing from constituents. What are your thoughts about just the overall safety? Do you feel that there is enough police presence overall, and the role that HPD is doing to protect the city and county of Honolulu?
You know, I think our uniform officers are doing a great job. They really are. And they are exceeding expectations. They're asked to do so much, right? But I still believe that a patrolling police officer is the best deterrent to crime. And we have a shortage of over 400 police officers now. And that's a problem. And we're doing our best to fill these positions, including, as the chief mentioned, bonuses for new recruits. But 400 patrolling police officers shortage, that's a problem.
Yeah, the council has continued year over year to put more money toward the department. Do you think that this is a dollar and cents issue, or is there something else?
Thank you for noticing that. That's absolutely true. Since I've been on the council, we've increased HPD's budget by about $50 million. And we're going to do that again this year. But again, as the chief said, we got to do more to recruit and then retain police officers. I think that's the key.
Speaking of budget, I want to get your thoughts on the mayor's budget that he outlined, and he spoke about a month ago in his State of the City address. Are you in alignment with some of the mayor's priorities, and what do you think overall about the budget that he is proposing?
Oh, absolutely. I think the mayor and the council are in agreement. Affordable housing, homelessness, modernizing DPP, climate change, public safety, and I want to throw one extra one in there, parks. You know, it's important to make sure our parks are clean, safe, usable, because you could have, maybe your house is crowded, right? And you have 3 kids in 1 bedroom, but you can take them to a nice, clean, maintained park where bathrooms are usable. To me, that's key. And I've been talking to our budget chair, Cordero, about putting a little extra money into our parks to make sure that they're, like I said, clean, safe, usable, perhaps some volleyball courts, sand volleyball courts here and there. That's been a concern that the public has been telling me about that they want. But yeah, our parks are great. We need more parks, more usable parks. We're fighting for space on tennis courts versus pickleball. The baseball leagues are competing for diamonds all over the island. So, I think that's another priority that I'd like to kind of get the mayor to push a little stronger.
Yeah, where do you see the biggest daylight between what your priorities are and what he's laid out?
Well, like I said, we're in general agreement, but the budget process is a timely one. It takes 3 months to go through. Each department comes to the city council and tries to justify their budget. By the way, it's a $3.6 billion budget with another $1 billion in capital improvement projects. So that's $4.6 billion. It's not easy to go through it line item by line item. And we ask a lot of tough questions. But for the most part, I think the mayor's on the right track.
One of those issues that you did bring up is affordable housing, and that is an issue that every lawmaker is dealing with here, whether it be from the city all the way up to the state and federal even. And there have been a number of proposals that have gone through over time. There have been some disagreements as well in the past between the administration as well as the city council about how to best incentivize affordable housing. Where do you see as some of the key measures or some of the key efforts that could be made during this body of legislative work for the city and council that might be the most significant for those who are struggling to make the ends meet and looking for that affordable housing?
It's fascinating. We've approved over 8,000 units since I've been the chair and the mayor's been the mayor. And over half of them are affordable. But what's interesting, when we go out into the community, people are saying, I'm all for affordable housing, but not in my backyard. Right? Which makes it really tough for council members to actually get out there and sometimes go against what the public wants. But we need affordable housing. And it takes, some guts to be able to stand up and say, well, no, we need to build affordable housing for local people. I'm the 5th of 6 kids. I'm sure you folks heard this before, but, we all were born and raised here. 3 of us went to Kamehameha schools. 2 went to Castle, and one of my sisters went to Kaiser, but I'm the only one who lives here because my siblings can't afford to live here anymore, right? So I'm fighting. I'm taking this very personal to fight for affordable housing. So what we've been doing is, if you build affordable housing, by the way, the city defines affordable housing at 120% AMI. The state defines it at 140% AMI, right? But that's still making well over $100,000. But really, the sweet spot is about 60 to 80% AMI. So on the council level, whenever a developer comes in and wants to build luxury or anything else for that matter, we push them and we squeeze them to say, hey, look, you need to build at 60 and 80% AMI. That's what we need. That's for local people to stay here and stay in Hawaii so that they can afford it. And we've been doing pretty good at that.
One of the things that's moving through the legislature right now that could have a big impact on our county are some bills that would make it so that you could do a lot more density on smaller lots, so that we could see, you know, I have to look at the numbers, but the dwellings, I believe it could be, you know, on a 2,000 square foot lot, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm sure you're well versed in that, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But, you know, this idea of subdividing single family lots, the state making that authority as opposed to the county. What are your thoughts about those bills?
So thank you for asking that question. So the bill was Senate Bill 3202 that was going through the legislature, passed by the Senate over to the House, and myself and Vice Chair Kia Aina, we decided to put in a resolution opposing it. And I'll tell you why. Because Honolulu already has a minimum lot size of 3.5, R3.5 it's called. But that's 3,500 square feet. We also have R5, which is 5,000 square foot minimum lot size, R7.5, R10, and R20. This would mandate that the county has to approve subdivisions as small as 2,000 square feet. So just as an example, if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, right now you get one house, possibly an ADU connected to that. What this bill would have done was take a 10,000 square foot lot, divide that into 5 lots, and then now you get 5 houses where there once was 1. Coupled with the fact that the bill also said, despite the subdivision part, it also said you could put 2 ADUs, 2 accessory dwelling units, next to the home that's already there. So now, instead of 1 house on a 10,000 square foot lot, you get 15 houses or 15 units. And I just thought, you know what, that's too much, too fast. We're not there yet. Right? I don't got a problem in the urban core where you got an apartment district, no problem. But in your residential district, I thought that was just too much. But I got to thank the legislature. Under the leadership, my office, we wrote a draft, submitted to them, and they adopted at least part of what I suggested, which was give the counties the discretion. In certain instances, it works. But you guys know, I've been fighting monster houses since I've been on the council, right? And this would create monster houses everywhere in the urban district. And by the way, the urban district is everywhere on Oahu that there's houses already. Yeah, so it's everywhere. So, you know, my community especially been hit hard by monster homes. So I thought to myself, okay, we better educate people on Senate Bill 3202.
In just looking at some of the other issues, because there is a lot, and we could talk all show about affordable housing, trust me. So maybe we'll get you back on just to talk about that.
Sure.
But we do want to kind of move on to some other things that are making headlines. One of the other things that is actually in your district is the usage of the shell. We know that Kilohana, the group that is now offering this free hula show that is open to the public as well as those who are visiting, has been getting some pushback from the organization that manages the parks in division. What are your overall thoughts about some of the conflict that's coming forth between Kilohana as well as the trust that oversees the park, and your overall recommendation for how they move forward?
So we as council members are trustees of Kapiolani Park. And the question really that I have is whether or not the trustees get to decide what a permitted use is. Yeah? But backing up a second. So nobody's got a problem with the free show. It's just like the old Kodak hula show that's every morning. Nobody's got a problem with that. What the city is thinking of doing is adding on a luau, with Hawaiian music that you have to pay for. The Kapiolani Park Preservation Society, a nonprofit from the community who cares about the park, and they do really good work. But they're saying, hey, wait, you cannot charge for this. You got to make them free. And there's the CNHA who's putting on the luau and the free show is saying, hey, look, this is how we're going to finance the free show. So we had a full-on hearing at the council, and we brought in the lawyers. The lawyers are telling us, yeah, it's fine. But we had a couple really interesting questions like, okay, if you cannot charge for the luau, what about the performances at the shell that you pay for? You know, what we were told by the Preservation Society was, well, that's not a problem because you only have one or two. This is a long range or multiple days. But I thought, okay, what about the symphony? The symphony sometimes does concerts with like 4. That's a long-term contract. Or how about AYSO, utilizing one of the Kapiolani Park fields, right? That's for a whole season. And I thought, okay, we want to be consistent here. Personally, I like the idea. I do. I think it's a great idea. But ultimately, I think the courts are going to end up deciding, not the council.
What makes you say that?
Because I think that right now the city's going forward with the idea, and the Preservation Society is probably going to sue the city over this.
Do you understand where they're coming from, this idea that, you know, this is a park that is for the people and that should be preserved as such? Do you see that argument? Or?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I've worked with the Preservation Society on other things, and I agree with them that we want to preserve it. But at the same time, the city needs to generate revenue too, right? I'm trying to find different ways to generate revenue so that we can lower your property taxes. You know, one of the ideas, and again, we could talk about this all day, we got a vacancy tax, a bill I introduced, right? To say, okay, if you're just going to invest your money and leave your house vacant and live on the mainland, we want to tax you more. Now, the realtors will say, well, wait, they don't use any of our city services. Why are we taxing them more? Well, yes, they have one house vacant that a local person could otherwise live. And if you can afford a $4 million house, I think you can afford a little bit more property taxes.
Want to move on to another topic, and that is regarding ocean safety. There is talk, that the mayor has outlined what that department should become its own entity, and outside of what it currently exists under EMS. What are your thoughts about the proposals moving forward about this separation? Because this is not a new idea. This has been talked about for some time. But do you think that this is something that could actually be moving forward?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The mayor did a task force that came out with a recommendation that ocean safety should be their own separate department. To me, that's a no-brainer. Automatic. Think about it. We live in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right? The ocean is a part of our daily lives. It used to be a part of my daily life before I had this job. But it really is. It's important. And this idea actually came from the lifeguards themselves, right? They said, hey, look, we think we should do this. I've been a supporter of the lifeguards since I've been on the council. I've been pushing and working with them for this program called Dusk to Dawn, right? So they had regular hours from 8 to 5 as an example. But guess what? The sun comes up at 5:30 and it goes down at 7:30 at night, and our beaches need protection. So on the council, at least at this point, we've been pushing for Dusk to Dawn, pushing for more lifeguards, and I think it's a great idea. The sticky part comes in as whether or not they should have their own commission, similar to the police commission and the fire commission. And that actually is a cost item. But here's the thing. For this to happen, the mayor can create a separate department utilizing the powers that he has under the charter. But to create a commission, it has to be put in charter, meaning that it has to be approved by voters. So we're looking to put that on the ballot this coming election to see if people want a separate, standalone ocean safety commission.
Sticking with the water, we want to ask you about the beach fronting Waikiki. We had Jeff Wagner on here from Outrigger recently, and he was talking about the real need for beach replenishment. When you look sort of Eva of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, they did beach replenishment there a number of years ago and built a groin, and the sand has stayed. But if you go further up the beach from there, you can see it's just the rock wall, especially around the Halekulani and further Eva. What are your thoughts about doing a more beach replenishment there, and also the addition of groins to kind of stabilize that area?
So I grew up surfing right out there. It was called Pops, Populars. Short, it was called Pops. And I used to sit there, wax my board, put the leash on, and there was a big beach. Now if you go down there, there's rebar sticking up. There's an exposed part of the hotel there. So absolutely we need to fix that problem. Now we need to be sensitive to surfers, right? Because one of the complaints was that if we put another groin out there, it's going to affect the surf. So we don't want to do that. But you know, the one that was built outside of the Royal Hawaiian seemed to be pretty tasteful, and it brought back the beach. So I think if we do it right, we could actually, you know, bring the beach back. But it's expensive, like everything else that we're doing. But hopefully the state will be chipping in some money there. They have a Waikiki Beach Preservation Association. The hotels are chipping in money. So I've talked to Jeff Wagner about that myself, and I'm in support.
When you look at that issue overall, one of the things that it brings up is these the tourist zones that we and the city is just trying to get those who are visiting the islands to stay in some of these areas so that they're not going to maybe the areas that are more frequented by the locals, to really try to enhance these tourist zones. When there are no beaches, when there are crimes in Waikiki, I mean, what more do you think needs to be done to enhance the visitor experience overall, so that we don't see, you know, them going into the communities and ultimately causing this conflict with local residents?
Oh, great point. And it, you know, Waikiki Beach is iconic. And if you got no sand, then you don't have Waikiki Beach anymore. So the city has been actually working with stakeholders to replenish outside of canoes and Kuhio Beach and whatnot. So this is just an extension of that. You know, you bring up an interesting point, because we've been getting requests to build hotels outside of Waikiki on Kapiolani Boulevard, as an example. What the council did in the Ala Moana Transit-Oriented Development Plan, we limited it to the area near the convention center. My predecessors had already approved hotels along Kapiolani Boulevard, and you know, in my mind, we want to keep the tourists in Waikiki, right? One of the arguments that I made was that where are all the tourists who will be in these Kapiolani Boulevard hotels? Where are they going to recreate? Closest beach is Ala Moana Beach Park. We already got you know, that's shortage of parking. Local people are competing, and all of a sudden you're going to have a bunch of tourists there. So I was really concerned about that.
You've been on the job for a number of years now. I'm just curious on your own reflection and having this job, and how you like it and how things are going. You know, I mean, it's no rest for the weary. I think it's nonstop.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it's the hardest job I've ever had. And I used to be a deputy public defender, right? And as an attorney, which is a difficult job in and of itself. But I got to tell you, it's a very satisfying job when you actually get stuff done, right? And you can see the fruit of your labor. As I mentioned, it's probably the most challenging thing I've ever done, because it is 60 to 80 hours a week, right? You got community meetings, neighborhood boards. Even as we're talking off camera, when I go to the supermarket, people want to stop and talk about issues. And I love that. That means people care. They want to be engaged. My kids don't like it so much because they just want to get in and get out, get home and eat. But yeah, no, I love it. And you can tell who loves this job and who doesn't, right? I think the mayor loves his job. He's so passionate about this, and I think that's why we get along so well.
One of the issues that you're also tackling is homelessness, especially with the area that you represent in the urban core of Honolulu. And, you know, we've seen the efforts by state officials, including the governor's administration, to set up kauhales in certain areas. What are those conversations like, specifically with regards to your district and what you represent? Because there are populations and pockets of homelessness throughout the urban core. What are some of the efforts that are currently happening right now to address some of those issues of homelessness?
You know, in Iwilei, we just purchased a building, and we intend to put a kauhale there, wraparound services dealing with folks who have or suffer from mental illness. You know, I've said this before, the antipsychotic medication actually works. But the Kekela ward at Queen's Hospital, I think they're going to be shutting down pretty soon for renovation. So where are all those people going to go? When people get arrested for, you know, doing things in public, illegal things in public, the police have the ability to take them to either Queens Hospital or the Hawaii State Hospital. Hawaii State Hospital is full, right? So where are these people getting services? So this kauhale is a great idea. We're working with the state. We're providing the land and the building. They're going to provide the services through, hopefully, the Department of Health. You know, the city tried a few years ago having a mobile unit with a doctor who could diagnose and then prescribe antipsychotic medication right there on the street. That hasn't worked as well as we were hoping it would work, because most people are like, no, I don't want that shot in my arm. I'm not taking that. And of course, they're suffering from mental illness. They're suspicious of everybody. But you know what we've noticed is, I represent East Honolulu. You used to have a pocket of homeless folks that are in downtown Honolulu. Then they migrated to Waikiki. Now they're migrating all the way to Hawaii Kai, you know, living on the bridges and whatnot. But ultimately, we got to build places for people to live, right? And that's expensive. We put in, the council put in $20 million last year, which is still alive this year, to actually build places for people to live. So that's my hope. We touched on this before, like, what should we be doing? My idea is the city shouldn't be building ourselves. We should not be building housing or affordable housing. We let the private developers do that, but we can provide the land, right? So what I've asked each council member to do is identify land within their district where we could build affordable housing, working with constituents to decide together, so that it's not, you know, not in my backyard kind of a thing. And then just prescribe to the developers at what area median income we want to target. Like I mentioned, 60 or 80% AMI. So to me, we've done that in the past. The recipe, we know the recipe, we know how to do it, and we should continue to do that.
And how was that received by the fellow council members? I would think that everybody wants housing, but no one likes to give away free land.
Well, we wouldn't be giving it away. We'd be leasing it at $1 a year, which is practically free. But the idea is to make it affordable for local families so that they can stay here in Hawaii, right? It's an investment, because what the city has been doing is buying buildings, as an example, and refurbishing them. But even that, the buildings are expensive, right, to buy, and the refurbishing is expensive as well. In my mind, you got vacant land, go build a building on that, brand spanking new, you know.
Half an hour goes by really quickly, and we're almost out of time. But before we let you go, just wanted to get just a final thought about where we're at with the city. There's a lot of issues that you're dealing with, but your message maybe to those who are watching out there who, you know, may be struggling. Times are tough right now. Cost of living is high. I mean, what are some of the things, your closing message to those out there who are wondering, what is the city council up to?
No, we're trying to find ways that we can generate revenue so that we can lower everybody else's cost of living, right? Lower your property tax. By the way, the city's only source of revenue is property taxes, right? And how do we lower that, right? I'm looking at possibly raising the taxes on bed and breakfasts, raising taxes on transient vacation rentals, right? And vacant properties, right? This is where outside investors are coming in and buying up property. They just leave it vacant, hold on to it for a few years, sell it for higher money. Anyway, if we raise taxes on these outside investors, I want to try to lower property taxes for everybody else, for local people.
Lowering taxes makes everyone happy. Tommy Waters, thank you so much for joining us
My
today.
pleasure.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Stay with us. Spotlight Now continues right after this.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, great conversation today with two of our leaders here in the city and county of Honolulu. First, starting off with Chief Joel Logan, giving us an update on some of the high-profile cases that we've seen. And with many of these profile cases, there seems to be a general sense in the community that crime is up, but the chief countering that with some numbers.
Yeah, he's saying that overall crime is actually down. Weapons incidents are up about 43%, but that runs the gamut of different kinds of weapons. And he did talk about the influx of guns coming into our community, primarily from the continent at this point. And he talked about the effect of these high-profile crimes that we've seen, specifically the Manoa incident, and just how that's affected the department and how it's affected him personally. He also talked about recruitment efforts, that $25,000 bonus that the mayor has proposed to try to get more officers joining the task force, joining the force, that is. And then we heard, of course, from Honolulu City Council Chair Tommy Waters about his efforts, specifically looking at housing and all that they're trying to do to increase revenue, but at the same time lower those property taxes.
Yeah, you heard from him really pushing for, he mentioned it twice, the vacancy tax, one of his proposals of ways to generate more money, but also a number of issues that he and the city council are tackling right now, but seems to be in agreement with the mayor's priorities that were outlined. Coming up next Tuesday, we're going to be focusing on trauma.
Yeah, very interesting conversation that we've laid out. We have invited a therapist, someone from the nonprofit world, and then also someone from the state to talk about the collective trauma that all of us have experienced with the Maui wildfires, with the murders in Manoa, and all the day-to-day grief that people are experiencing, how it impacts our lives and what we can do about it. We hope you'll join us then. Until then, enjoy this beautiful shot of urban Honolulu, blue skies out there, just a few clouds.